Hi, I'm Kaelig. I've spent the past 15 years working on design systems at companies like the Financial Times, Salesforce, and Shopify. Today, I'm here as the co-chair of the Design Tokens W3C community group, and I have an exciting announcement for you. This is probably the largest collection of design system experts in one single room. We all know design tokens. And honestly, it's 2025. We shouldn't still be copy-pasting values across our design tools. Shipping a rebrand, keeping design and code in sync, documentation that doesn't drift. Design tokens help deliver all of this. You know this, and your teams know this. But we've all been there. You update a value, a color in your library, and it takes months to propagate across all your tools and all your products. Teams have tried to solve this for years with scripts that are customs, formats that are proprietary, and exports that are tool-specific. So to solve this at a global level, I assembled a team of experts with centuries of combined design system experience. These folks have scaled design systems at massive companies and built tools that define how we make products. Together, we form the Design Tokens W3C community group. Our mission is to standardize how design tokens are defined and exchanged across the industry. For the past 5 years, we collected hundreds of use cases from the community. We initially published a first draft, and early adopters immediately started building and testing it and gave us a ton of feedback. After 3 drafts and many, many iterations, today I am so proud to announce the first stable version of the design token specification. A production-ready JSON specification for your design systems, a stable API for tools and plugin makers, and eventually interop across tools, meaning your tokens will work everywhere. So what does this mean for you? You can safely start implementing the specification in your tools, in your design system pipeline, and in your plugins. For the execs in the room, no vendor lock-in and less in-house custom stuff to maintain. In fact, a few very popular design tools already implement the new version of the spec, and many more are already planning to support it very soon. And you might wonder, why make today's announcement here? And to answer that question, here's Chad Bergman to talk to you about what this means for Figma. Chad.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kaelig. Awesome. Can we give one more big round of applause? All right. This is a fantastic milestone for the design system token community. So thankful for them. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Chad, and I'm on our advocacy team here at Figma. And I am thrilled to be here with all of you today. Now, as Kaelig hinted, we have something in store for you. All right, having the ability to import and export variables has been an ask that we've heard for a while now. And when we launched variables, we've had an open source version of a plugin that handled importing and exporting. But we've known all along that we wanted to align with the W3C community group spec. So we didn't initially launch a native import and export option. We didn't want to have it be opinionated or potentially influence the spec. Rather, we felt that an open source plugin was going to be the best way to support that with the community. But now that the first stable version is out, we're introducing the native import and export in Figma, completely aligned with the design token specification. Now, when you go to export, it can be done in 2 different ways. First, you can click on the dropdown to export, from an individual mode, or you can right-click on a collection to export all of the modes in that collection. You'll get a zip file of JSON files, one for each mode. Now, import, it's a little more nuanced, so let's talk about that. If you have a blank collection, importing, it will create your variables, and it will map all of the values for you. And it can handle multiple modes all at once. So you can bring multiple JSON files, drag them right into the authoring area, like you see here. Now, if you have an established collection already, so let's say we're going to import into an existing mode in our collection. Well, we're not going to create new variables. It's just going to update the values for you. And if you're importing into an extended collection, it will only add overrides to the values that are differing from your parent collection. So, to reiterate, importing into a blank collection, it's going to create new variables for you. If it's going into an existing mode, it's going to update your values. And if it's going into an extended collection, it's going to map those differences between the parent collection and the import as overrides. And as mentioned, import and export, it will be available on all Figma tiers, and it's going to launch alongside extended collections next month. All right, and we also saw earlier that there's some additional updates, right? There's some significant updates to the authoring UI. The biggest change is we have a new navigation for Figma Design. With accessing variables in that left rail, we now have proper full-screen view for the authoring modal. I know this is something that I'm really excited for. I hope that you're excited for this as well. We have so much more space when we're working on our variables. And we've wanted this space for a while now so we can add additional authoring capabilities. And this is going to set things up for continued improvements into the future. And if you missed it, to access the new variables UI, just click on this variables icon right there in the left side rail. And don't worry, if you're working on a design and you still need to access the mini modal so you can see things, you can go ahead and just click on the arrows icon at the upper right and bring that into a windowed view. And we can also now view our subscribed collections. So those libraries that you have enabled in your file, you can now see the collections within there. And when you have that, you'll see your subscribed collections at the top left there in a lighter gray, and any of your local collections will be darker. Now, when you view a subscribed collection, there's a few things. Note that you can't make any changes to them. However, you can do things like copy those values or export, and you could even extend a collection. Now, that's all recapping the authoring updates, but speaking of extended collections, this is the thing that I am really, really excited about. This is something we've all been waiting for. So let's talk more about extended collections and managing multiple brands at scale. Now, we saw Naomi talk about this earlier in the keynote, but let's take a little deeper dive into this feature. Before, it was easy to do things like swap between light and dark modes in Figma, right? But brands were always just a little bit different, especially when we have scenarios where our brands each have multiple modes. So we wanted a different axis for them, and Extended Collections provides that. It lets us easily swap between things like, well, here at Figma, Figma Design and FigJam, and just like this example right here, we can go between our light and dark mode for each of those. And it does this all via an inheritance-based approach. Subbrands will inherit from your root collection. In this case, we have our Figma Design collection as our root. And this delivers our variable structure along with our mode structure that each of the brands will inherit. In our case, the root Figma Design collection, it gives us our light and our dark mode, as well as our variable structure. And when we extend that to our FigJam brand, it inherits those modes as well as the structure. And here's where we can make our overrides. In this case, we've overridden the brand colors to be purple for FigJam. And all of this is going to make switching so much easier. And we now have those separate dropdowns for our collections where we can switch between brands like Dev Mode, FigJam, Buzz. And the best thing about this is you only have to define what's different between the brands. Here's an actual screenshot from our own internal definitions for our FigJam extension. You can see right at the top there, we have some overrides for light, dark, enhanced contrast modes. But if you look, a lot of the values are already inherited. Now, when you're doing this and moving to extended collections, there's one key thing that you're going to need to decide. And that is, well, should I define my extensions locally in the same file as your parent collection? Or should you maybe home them in separate files? And both of them have their advantages. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. All right, so let's talk about local first. So here I have a library, and we're just going to focus on our modal right here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up the variables window. And we have a very simplified example here, just brought over a few of our colors. And I'm just going to go ahead and right-click, and we're going to extend our Figma colors collection. And here I'm going to just double-click to rename that. We'll call this our FigJam colors. And this is where we can start to now define our overrides. So for our brand, of course, we are using purple for FigJam. We'll give it a brand secondary here. We'll just bring our same values. And we can see as I'm changing them here, it's outlined in blue, so we can tell that we have the override in place here. So now that we have this locally, we can instantly use that, and we can see the changes. So I'll just apply it at the page level here. I'm going to switch this to FigJam colors. I have that light mode and that dark mode already. I can switch it back into Figma colors, and there we go. I can change them all. Now, we could set this up all locally, have everything in one place so we can see those changes on the fly. But what happens if we maybe want to take a more subscribed approach? Well, I'm going to go ahead and just delete that collection. And at this point, we could take our library and we could go ahead and we could publish that library. And that's where our teams can then use it and view this collection. So I'm going to go in here to a new file, and we'll go ahead and bring up our variables. And I have a local variable now, but we can see here I have my subscribed collections. So much in the same way we do this locally, we can right-click, and we can extend our collection. And once again, we could go ahead and make our changes in our child collection here. So as we switch that out to our purple, we'll switch out just our light mode here as well. And now we have that extended locally in this file here. And if we ever want to see what's local and what is subscribed, we can use this settings menu here to go between all collections, which will show what's subscribed and local, or we can see what's just created in this file, which is now a local here. So our extension here, we'll rename that to our FigJam colors as well. And now, if we were to go into our assets here, and we take a copy of that modal, bring it out into our file, we can go ahead and apply our mode to it. So it's really that same process, whether you are extending it from locally or subscribed. But the question, it still remains. Once you are deciding between subscribed and local, where should they live? Well, really it depends. Because if it's local, your updates, as we saw, they'll propagate instantly, it centralizes maintenance, And we know where all of our extensions live. The downside is that teams can't own their own extensions, though. So if that's something where your teams need that flexibility for experimentation, defining extensions in separate files can actually make a lot of sense. And when we talk about extending a subscribed collection, this does enable teams to own it, have that distributed maintenance. And in our example, our FigJam teams could completely own the brand extension and easily experiment with different overrides. However, this can make it harder to update when it comes to publishing changes. So, as I said, it really depends. And you might be asking yourself, well, hey, what would we recommend? What should we do, right? Well, as a rule of thumb, we've kind of been using this rule of 10 so far. Basically, if you have 10 brands or less, define them locally in the same library. Just keep track of it all in one place. But if you have more than 10 brands, try using a subscribed model. This will likely scale better. And once you decide which approach makes the most sense for your system, next is looking at, well, hey, how do I migrate to that, right? Well, let's talk about migrating to extended collections. After we talked to roughly 20 different companies about this, what we really discovered was, hey, you know what? Everyone has a very different setup. So there's really not a one-size-fits-all solution. However, there's two overarching themes that did kind of show through, and that's where all brands live in the same collection, each defined as a mode, or you have duplicated libraries. So I'm going to walk a little bit through what does migration look like. But we're going to talk about the first one today, where you have all of your brands in the same collection as modes. And we'll have more information to share soon about how to handle maybe a duplicated library approach. So when you have the same collection, it's really straightforward because designers are already using variables that have the same ID behind the scenes. And that ID is what really, really matters with extended collections. So to do this migration, what we want to do is base each of the additional brands on our single root brand. And this can be done in just 6 steps. The first is to export your color values from every brand except for your first one. That's going to become your root. Next, delete your brand-specific modes. That's right, yeah, I said it, delete your modes. It's a bit spooky, right? But don't worry because we've exported the values and we can always revert in the file history if we absolutely need to. Next, we'll create our new extended collection. So this time, let's talk about dev mode. We're going to create an extension for that. Once we create that collection, we just import our previously exported values. The import is going to add those overrides on the variables that are different. In this case, it adds green as the brand color for our dev mode. And that's it on the authoring side. Now, there are a couple additional steps yet, and this comes into the consumption side. Well, the first thing is, hey, accept those updates. Once it's been published, accept that. You can now start to use them. However, when you do update, the previous application of any mode overrides you had will be reset to your default mode. So designers will need to reapply their mode settings. However, this should be pretty straightforward because we can set it at the page level or we can set it on those individual frames. Just depends on what the file contents are. And for any new files, you can set up those extended collections to use as a default mode at your team or at your workspace level. So by doing that, our dev mode designers, any new file that they create, they can have it automatically set up to use the dev mode theme. All right, so that's it on the migration walkthrough. And as I mentioned, we're going to have some additional migration flow assets for you all here very soon in the near future. All right, before I go today, I want to say there's one more thing. To help with these migrations, we know that people are going to be experimenting with libraries. You're going to be moving things around. So in order to help support that, we're going to launch variable support for the swap library command. This will end up rolling out across all paid tiers in November as well. So that's all for today. And I hope that you're as excited about these variable updates as I am. We can't wait for you to start diving into extended collections for your multi-brand setups. Thank you so much, everyone.